Now, after our first video where we learned about some key elements of proportion, now we're going to apply that skill. I'm going to start by drawing a head shape. It does not matter how big or small I make that head shape, as long as it's small enough that I can fit the whole body on the page. How big is the whole body? Well, you already know that. I want my head height to fit a little less than 8 times in my body. So, using that same measuring technique, but with my pen this time, I'm going to isolate how big I made the head and then mark out 8 chunks that are the same size. Using my thumb to mark one side of the head, the tip of the pen to mark the opposite side, and just stacking those divisions up. So I see I've made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 little boxes. I'm going to put a line about halfway through the bottom box, and I'm going to identify the width of the shoulders. We remember the shoulders at their widest point, or the torso at its widest point, should be about 2 head widths wide. So I identify that from my medial line, and then I isolate that at the bottom of that head. I'm going to add in a neck, which is slightly skinnier than the head and should be no more than half of the box. And then the neck connects with an angled line to the shoulders, which we already established the width of. Now I'm going to identify the bottom half of my person. I measure that. My first guess is a little bit off. My second guess is right on the money. So I'm going to find my midpoint. And ideally, the space from including the torso and the head will equal the space for all of the legs and feet. So that's what I'm just double checking right now, marking out where the middle, top, and bottom should be. I'm going to label that with T, M, and B. Now, knowing that my waist needs to be about 2 head widths wide, and that it needs to be at or above that middle line, I can also identify the width of my waist. So what I've done is started with the head, and then I determined the whole length or the boundaries of the body. I found the width or the other boundaries on that edge. Now, here you see, after having defined where the torso ends, that I'm drawing a leg. The legs, we know, should take up the whole bottom half, and the top and bottom of the leg should be about the same length. Because we know the width of the waist, and we know that there is no gap, we know that each leg at where it joins the body should be about 1 head width wide. And that means that about half of the waist should be set aside for each leg. So I found the midpoint down in the leg section, and I made myself 2 ovals, 1 for each part of the leg, the top and the bottom, keeping the top one thicker and the bottom one thinner. Now I also know that my elbow goes down to about the solar plexus, or the belly button, and that we think of that as being about the second line, or the second head height line in the body. That's a good way to find that. The lower part of the arm should be about the same length as the upper part of the arm. So, measuring the upper part, using that size for the lower part, defining the space, and then drawing it in. Something this shows us is that the wrist should land somewhat beneath the waist. And then we're going to also have a hand attached to the bottom. Here I'm drawing the curve around the belt just to define the space a little more so it's easier to see. You don't have to do that yourself, but I think it helps to show the shape of the body a little. Now I know that I want my hand to be wider than the wrist. I want my fingers to be about the same length as the palm of the hand. And if you hold your right hand so that your middle finger is flat against the palm of your left hand, you'll see that your middle finger should be about as big as your palm. So our hand should be about 2 equal sections. One is the palm and one is the fingers. Now, knowing the length of each part of the arm, I can draw in the other arm and the other side. Making sure to get 4 fingers. And now I see some areas where my drawing is a little bit loosey-goosey, had some issues, so I'm going to darken up some lines and make things a little bit clearer. Proportionally, this person looks pretty good, and I'm going to add on some hair for them as well. Right now I'm just outlining where the hairline should be at the top, giving her a little bit of a shape. Notice hair doesn't add to the height of the head. Hair is included in the height of the head, which means that you need to have your hairline and incorporate space for your eyes and other facial features. There are guides for facial proportion as well. There's a mathematical relationship between the size of different parts of the face also. You are more than welcome to look into that yourself. I highly recommend it. But for our class, for our purposes, we care more about the whole body proportion and less about the facial proportion. Now, this first drawing was just of a person who was in place looking straight at us, standing straight ahead. Now I'm going to draw another drawing, and I ask you to as well. This drawing is going to have 2 things different. One, it's going to have an arbitrary size of head, which I'm making smaller, and you'll notice I can make an adult human-looking drawing regardless of the head size, as long as the proportions are correct. Now I'm also going to make this person in a pose because our unit is about gesture. But to start that, I still have to make the head and then define how tall it would be standing straight up. Then I'm going to use half of the height, make sure to find my midpoint or my waist. You can see my medial line very lightly and each mark that shows a head height. So I've isolated 7.5 head heights for this smaller person, this smaller drawing. I've isolated about half of that, which is the height or the size of the torso and head, also known as the size of the legs. And I'm going to isolate that. I want this person to be jumping and kicking their heels together while waving their arms in the air. So I'm going to first determine how big they need to be, figure out how much space each part needs to take up. I've got my medial line for my body and for my whole thing, really. And then I've isolated how long the legs should be. Because they're going to be jumping in at different angles, I need to know that size. Then I cut that in half as my legs are made of 2 pieces. Each piece is about the same size, so I can use one measurement for both leg tangents. And so I'm making medial lines for both legs right now. Now, once I have established the tangent for one of those legs, I'm going to go in and identify the angle that the other leg is going to occupy. And again, I'm isolating the correct size for each piece, finding an angle that I appreciate, and making sure that both parts fit together, that the lengths and shapes will match. And here I started to fill in the size of that shape, but I thought it would be better to double check the width that I had made this object. So once again, I want my legs to be about 1 head width wide at the top, and I want my waist to be 2 head widths wide. So I was just double checking that. And I started giving myself a 3-part leg right there. I don't know what I was thinking. I was kind of making a crazy choice. I'm going to go back and correct that in a little bit. Now, I know where the elbow lands, right on that 3rd mark down. And I also know that the top and bottom of the arm should be the same length, so I'm able to determine where the arm should go and the angles that it wants to take up. Again, I'm using the size of the body to determine how big other parts of the body should be. So now that I have that tangent and I know the size and thickness of each part, then I can flesh things out, keeping in mind that I want my hand, my palm of my hand and my fingers of my hand to be about at most the same height. I'm going to measure that as well. So as you see, I'm using my proportional measurement to draw almost every part of this picture. And I've made the hand way too giant in this drawing. That's what I'm writing right here. Too big of fingers. So I need to make those a little bit smaller. I had done the right measuring, but then I just drew right past my measurement, so I done goofed. And I'm sorry, guys. If you draw in pencil, then you can erase the things that you make a mistake of. I drew in pen so that it would hopefully be a little darker and easier to see, but that does make it so I can't erase, which is a drag. So now, knowing the size and the shape of both arms, I decided I want this arm right above the head. I know that it has 2 pieces, each about the same length, thicker on the part attached at the shoulder, and a little thinner on the bottom part. Because the arm is made of 2 pieces, I have to have an angle between the upper and lower arm. That's one of the important things that proportion helps us to see, is that bodies are made of discrete or unique chunks. Upper arm, lower arm, left and right, upper leg, lower leg, etc. Each of these parts has bones that determine the shape and structure of that part, and those bones are mostly linear. They form lines. If you have people whose arms are curving, your people are going to be kind of weird. Almost never should we have curving in our long, straight bones. Now, as you can see, I've already figured out my tangents, I've decided the angles that things need to be at, and now I am connecting the dots. This is where I realized that I had made my character have a 3-part leg, so I'm making an adjustment. Notice, if you mess something up in the middle of the process, it's pretty easy to correct and adjust. So I'm making sure that my body parts are all the right size comparatively. And other than the giant hand, what we have is a pretty natural, fairly realistic looking person. don't seem quite so strange, adding maybe some hair or other details. Some of the information about the clothing. So that's going to be one of the elements that we're going to add in as we progress with this project. So I hope that this has illustrated the ways, or some of the ways, that we can use body proportion to guide how big or how small our human beings and their body parts should be. There are lots of ways to draw people correctly, but using proportion helps to make any size that you want to draw work right. So I hope that you experiment with proportion and that you've learned a lot from this. Have fun, guys. Happy making.